So the Chiefs have a chance to keep the dynasty moving full steam ahead in this year's draft, in part because they have not one, not two, not three, but 4 picks in the top 100. Well, in today's video, I have a conversation with Garrett from Football Analysis, who does an incredible job in his NFL and draft coverage about realistic moves the Chiefs could make and players they could draft based on their needs before free agency. So let's get into it. But first, how about those? So the Chiefs have pick 31. Sadly, it's not pick 32 because of how Super Bowl 59 played out, but still the end of the first round. They've got a few needs, obviously, that they have when building this roster. Brett Veach spoke at the Combine this past week. By the time you're actually watching this video, it'll be the week prior. He spoke on a few different things about this draft class that I found interesting. He said it was, in his mind and with his guys in their eyes, it's a defensive-heavy draft. He specifically talked D-line, linebackers, mentioned a little bit about cornerbacks, and then obviously talked about how deep the running back class is too. Kind of made it seem like, this is just reading into his presser a little bit, that they might look for a running back later. But that's what I wanted to talk to you about, is just let's look at round 1, round 2 for the Chiefs, some possible scenarios that could play out. And based on your study of the Chiefs, I mean, I know you study every team and you report on them and give analysis on every team in the NFL, but based on your study, I'd love to kind of pick your brain, because I know you do hours of draft study and prep leading up to draft season, just on the Chiefs and where you think they should go based on these needs. A lot of people say, hey, let's get a left tackle. Round 1, we need a left tackle. I would agree, we need a left tackle. It's just very hard to get a quality level starter at the end of these rounds. Who, if anybody, do you think the Chiefs could potentially try to snag as a future left tackle at the end of round 1, or maybe if they fall far enough, they could go up and get?
Yeah, so I really think the Chiefs are in a good position draft-wise. They have 4 top 100 picks and ultimately 4 top 95 picks in the 2025 draft. And they have, of course, their 3 picks and then the extra pick from the L'Jarius Sneed trade. And fortunately for the Chiefs, the Titans had a tremendously bad 2024 season, so that pick is worth a lot more than it would have been if they had a good season. So they have 3 picks in the top 66. And when you look at the presumable tackle run that's going to happen, I think there's going to, whether it's just tackle, whether it's offensive line, I think it starts with, honestly, as early as the Vikings at 24, although they would go interior offensive line, which really wouldn't hurt the Chiefs at all. But the Texans at 25, they need a tackle. The Ravens potentially may lose Ronnie Stanley in free agency. The Lions interior offensive line, I wouldn't be surprised if they go after. So there's pretty quickly a run of offensive linemen that could happen directly in front of the Chiefs. Now, I am a Vikings fan, and that kind of plays into this, but I think it would make a lot of sense for the Chiefs to trade both 31 and 66 and give the Vikings that and pick for or in exchange for pick 24, and then the Vikings would obviously give a pick back. And if a player like Armand Membou from Missouri falls to pick 24, that would be extremely beneficial for the Chiefs. I don't know if he necessarily will fall, but he's a guy that has guard and tackle versatility. I like his game a lot. And ultimately, when I'm watching guys on tape, you can pretty quickly tell what players cannot do at the position. And what I mean by that is, you can watch the quarterbacks in this class and realize that none are going to be able to make the plays that Patrick Mahomes makes. The off-platform throws, the plays that everybody loves him for. The guys in this class cannot make those plays. So basically translating that to the tackle position, you can pretty quickly realize what offensive linemen can't do. And when I look at Armand Membou, his guard tackle versatility, he is kind of like Joe Tooney in that sense, where he can play inside or out. But there's also Josh Simmons from Ohio State, who I like a lot. Unfortunately, Simmons tore his ACL midway through the 2024 season, but he was having a really good year for Ohio State. And I am a firm believer that had he not tore his ACL when he did, that he would probably be a top 10 to 12 player in this class. And I don't want to make light of a significant injury like that, but we're talking about a torn ACL. We're not talking about multiple ligaments with, ligaments being damaged long-term and that type of thing. So I would like to think that he would eventually recover and that he would probably be good by opening day and hopefully by summer in the best case. So I think those are 2 players for Kansas City with Armand Membou and Josh Simmons that they could potentially look into trading up for.
Membou is from Lee Summit, where I live. So yeah, he's a local guy, as is Ursary. He's a local guy, grew up Ruskin Heights High School, about 10 minutes from my house. So it's fun talking about a couple of local guys in particular. I think Membou is primarily a right tackle, right? But either way, like the Chiefs, I wouldn't even care if that's what they did, because I think you're moving on from Jawan Taylor next year regardless. So if you can get just a quality starter tackle either side, even if they're going to go like 1 year Band-Aid or something once again with like DJ Humphries, if you could just go and get the best tackle available in round one, like I would love it. Josh Simmons, I saw him mocked recently, like by Sharp Football Analysis, at pick 31 to the Chiefs. There's no way, in your opinion, he falls that far, right? Even with his injury?
I mean, you never know. I don't want to say never, because weirder things have happened. If you would have asked me, prime example, 3 years ago, I am actually doing a video that will be out. Actually, I think it'll probably already be out by the time, or it'll be out in a couple of days after this video. But I'm grading picks from the 2022 draft where we discussed the grading of Trent McDuffie. And if you would have asked me back in 2022 if Trent McDuffie would fall to pick 21, where the Chiefs would eventually take him, I would have said no chance. I thought McDuffie was a top 12 talent in the class. What do the Chiefs, a good organization, do? They trade up when the talent is falling directly in front of them. So with Josh Simmons, there's going to probably be a bit of an injury tax. And that's the reality of, I mean, that's what happens whenever a player gets hurt. An injury tax happens. They might miss some time. They might not be the player they were, although I think he will be. I mean, he's shown every trait that he was going to be a good franchise tackle for a long time. I wouldn't put it past him falling all the way to pick 31. The reality is players fall every year, and it could be Josh Simmons this year. So I would say it's a non-zero chance that he falls to 31. I wouldn't bank on it, of course, but I don't think it's impossible.
Well, let's say this. The year that the Chiefs drafted Felix Anudike-Uzomah at the end of the first round, Brett Veach actually said they tried to trade up. They couldn't get into the lower 20s like they wanted to. They then explored options of trying to trade out, but they couldn't get a early enough second round pick that they were comfortable enough moving back, so they ended up just getting FAU at 31. With all that being said, just sometimes it doesn't play out how they would like it. So let's say they cannot trade up to the mid-20s if the right guy falls. They're stuck at 31. Would you be comfortable with taking somebody like Josh Connerly Jr. or Ariante Ursary as like hey, this could be your left tackle, it might take a little time? Like, what are your thoughts on them at this point in time?
So I'll give a pretty detailed on both. I am a big Josh Connerly guy. Now, I will say this, full transparency, if you go search Josh Connerly on Twitter, you will probably see a rep from the Senior Bowl where Marshall pass rusher Mike Green, absolutely, he got the best of them. I mean, I was at the Senior Bowl. I saw it live in front of me. Everybody had the exact same reaction, and it was not a good rep from Connerly. But I think there was a year of tape. Now, he did have some trouble against Ohio State, but I mean, they have two really good pass rushers in Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, who will be selected probably in the top 50 of the 2025 draft. And you can argue that would be a concern that he had trouble against two really good players. But I think there was a year of good tape from Connerly to suggest that he'll be a good tackle at the NFL level. Now, little fun fact with Connerly, he was a running back in high school. And here we are, 4, 5, 6 years later, he's an NFL offensive tackle prospect. Now, typically whenever you have guys that are different positions, in Joe Alt's case last year, a tight end transitioning to an offensive tackle, if you present that type of work ethic to go from one position to the other and, not just put on 60 pounds, 80 pounds, eating McDonald's hamburgers and fries, but you actually put on good weight and look good in the process and play at a high level like Connerly did, I think he's going to be fine. He obviously has the athleticism given his former background as a running back, so you're not going to have to worry about the speed guys getting around the edge. Unfortunately, like we saw in the Super Bowl with Jalix Hunt, and Jalix Hunt had a really good game in the Super Bowl. Now, that was not a good situation for Joe Thuney to be in specifically, but I bring that up because Ariante Ursary, to me, is a solid prospect, but I think there's clear limitations athletically. I think his anchor is really good. I think he's a really, really strong player, but I worry about him being out on an island. And when you're in a conference like the AFC, forget division, because we're talking about the conference. We're talking about a team that's been to the Super Bowl, 5 times in the past 6 years. The division really doesn't matter at this point. We're talking about the conference. Teams are going to key in on that. Teams are going to be able to figure Ariante out pretty early on that, hey, this guy does not have the athleticism to get out and really, have a jump set and be able to get out and stop those speed guys early on. So there's definitely pros and cons for both. I would prefer Connerly to Ursery for the Chiefs' specific situation, especially at times because of how far Patrick Mahomes drops back in the pocket and just how his general playing style is. I'd rather have the athletic tackle with Mahomes than I would the stout tackle, if you will.
And before I get into the rest of this interview, if you're looking for a premium mattress designed to upgrade your sleep, improve your overall quality of life, and is also conveniently shipped to your door for free in the US, then look no further than to the longest active sponsor of the channel, Bear Mattress. Make sure to head to bearmattress.com/HBTC and use my code HBTC to get 40% off your mattress plus 2 free pillows. My wife and I have actually had our mattress for more than 2 years now, which has been great for my low back pain, and our experience was just like yours would be after ordering. Both of these mattresses were shipped to our front door. Again, shipping is free in the US. They were super easy to unbox, and if you tend to sleep hot like me, Bear's sleep recovery technology uses Celliant-powered fabric to help you stay cool throughout the night. Plus, Bear knows everybody has different preferences and sleep positions, so to help find the best mattress for you, they made a sleep quiz to help remove all the guesswork. I sleep on my back and prefer a medium firmness to my mattress, but my wife sleeps on her stomach and prefers a mattress that's more firm, and that's why Bear matched us up with the Elite Hybrid mattress to benefit us both. We actually loved our sleep so much that we got a Bear Cub mattress for our youngest daughter last year, then more recently got one for our oldest daughter as well, so now our entire family sleeps in a borderline hibernated state. But don't just take my word for it. Bear also just ran a survey on over 300 of their recent customers where 82% saw an improvement in their sleep quality on their new mattress, which is why 95% of those customers said they'd recommend Bear to a friend. And unlike other brands, Bear mattresses do not contain fiberglass, which can be detrimental to your health, and all of Bear mattresses are also created without the use of harmful chemicals, so you can sleep safely and soundly knowing there will be no off-gassing. On top of that, Bear mattresses have a limited lifetime warranty and even offer financing options and flexible payment plans. And if it makes you nervous to buy something you haven't tried, Bear has a 120-night sleep trial, so you get more than 3 months to make sure that you love it. I certainly love my quality of sleep with Bear Mattress, and I think you will too. So to upgrade your sleep, go to bearmattress.com/HBTC and use code HBTC to get 40% off your Bear mattress plus 2 free pillows. This is higher than what's being offered on site, so check it out while you can. I'm ever so curious to see what the Chiefs are going to do. I feel like their ultimate long game plan was Orlando Brown Jr., and obviously it didn't end up working out, but I just revisited the other day like how many draft picks they gave up for the guy. Holy smokes. I mean, I feel like that was their long-term plan, and he's still playing at a decent level. We don't need to get into that situation and why he ended up with the Bengals or anything, but it's just so hard, and it's so intriguing to see what the Chiefs are going to end up doing, because when you hit free agency, you mentioned like Ronnie Stanley, like most of these guys that walk into free agency, they're 30 plus years of age, and that's when you typically start to dip from a prime production level. So it's like, okay, do the Chiefs now take another flyer on one of these guys and hope that they can develop them? Like they did that with Kingsley last year, and I think it's too early to say for sure, like, oh, he's not going to do anything productive even as a tackle. Like they like him potentially as a guard, but I don't know if you could give up on him completely as a tackle yet. It's just that's one of the most intriguing positions for the Chiefs for me, and it's like one of the most important too, because we've seen it. If Mahomes just has like serviceable tackle play, he could probably win a Super Bowl. If he has below average tackle play, and that's no offense to Joe Tooney, he did his best as a left guard, you get whooped in a Super Bowl. So that's the position I think most Chiefs fans are watching out for the most here.
I would agree with that, and also what I think needs to be remembered with the Chiefs specifically is, I don't know how this is brought up specifically within the Chiefs kingdom, but Andy Reid is an offensive line coach first and foremost. So I'm so glad that you brought the point of Kingsley Suamataia up, because I'm not just giving up on him after 1 year. I think if 2024 as a whole proved anything with players that had resurgence years, in my case, Sam Darnold having a year that nobody would have thought because it was happening. I mean, I'm not like saying this to like dunk, because obviously you guys went to the Super Bowl, we didn't, but statistically Darnold put up better numbers than Mahomes. Now he had, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and everybody else, but it was just to show like, an all-time great didn't put up the numbers that Sam Darnold did. And basically what I'm saying is the resurgence of players. So to give up on, Kingsley, like you said, after 1 year, I'm not giving up. And even Felix and Adike Uzama on the other side of the ball, I have my concerns with him, but to say that I'm entirely out on him after 2 years, I'm not. It's just, I'm not out on trench players after a year, or in some cases even 2 years, based on how long it takes to adjust to the physicality, based on how long it takes, to go from playing, if you're an SEC school, no offense, but playing, Vanderbilt once a year or another lower ranked team in the conference once a year to going up against Chris Jones every single day in practice. There's a big difference between playing grown men versus 21 or 22-year-old linemen in the trenches every week.
Speaking of the trenches, let's go opposite side of the ball. I know it's a really deep defensive tackle class. Brett Veach specifically complimented the D-line, just the depth and overall talent of this draft class. If the Chiefs, let's just say they weren't happy with who was left at the end of round one as far as like an offensive tackle prospect. And they're like, well, we don't want to take another flyer, but let's get a guy on the D-line that we know, like, hey, we have a pretty good grade on him, and we think putting him either next to or putting him in rotation with Chris Jones is going to be a great thing for the Chiefs and the D-line. A couple of reasons for that. Chris Jones is not getting any younger. He's going to be, I believe, 31 this season. And he's got a couple years left on his deal. He's a big part of it, but they still need bodies. You've got 3 defensive tackles right now, free agents, and then also Charles Omenihu, defensive end, is a free agent. Is there anybody that's going to be available in your eyes at the end of round one that or that could go early second round that you don't think the Chiefs will be able to go up and get? If so, who would that be, and who are a couple guys you would be keeping eyes on?
Yeah, so I go back to the Chiefs being in a prime position to trade up because, I mean, sure, they got their rear ends kicked in the Super Bowl, but they had a guard playing left tackle. They had a player who I thought was going to probably go for over 1,000 yards if he stayed healthy, and Rashee Rice out for the year. They still had Xavier Worthy have a pretty good season, all things considered. I know he had a really strong second half of the 2024 season. I'm not going to really include his production in the Super Bowl because of how that production happened. But I think that, the Chiefs still went to the Super Bowl. They're not in a bad position. So if you can trade up instead of getting a B+ player and then you can go get that A level player, I still think they're in a prime position to trade up, even if that is on the defensive side of the ball. And like we said, there's going to be somebody that falls. We just don't know who. And I look at a player like Michigan's Kenneth Grant, who I have actually mocked the Buffalo Bills quite a bit. And the Bills are not selecting that much in front of the Chiefs in the first round. And if the Bills need a defensive lineman the way they do, an interior defensive lineman, why not just go give them the middle finger in the draft, if you will, trade up directly in front of them and go get Kenneth Grant when you know that that's going to be a guy on their board. And Kenneth Grant he's 6'3", 340, but despite being 340, he's not like your typical, like, oh, I'm just going to stand here like Vince Wilfork and just, you have to maneuver the whole run play around me. He's not like that at all. There's a clip. If you know anything about Kenneth Grant, the clip where he tracked down Penn State's Katron Allen, who's a running back, by the way. I didn't specify that, but he tracked him down 30 yards downfield. That is, if you know anything about Kenneth Grant, that clip. So we're talking about a 340-pound lineman that showed some pass rush ability. We're not talking about a Chris Jones, 15-sack guy here, but some pass rush ability and a guy that can absolutely stop the run. And anytime you can have both, and what I love about the situation that whether it's Kenneth Grant or whether it's a guy like TJ Sanders from South Carolina, another player that I like would be walking into as a rookie, they are not going to ever be the main focus for the opposing offensive line. You're going to have Chris Jones there. You're going to have George Karlaftis there. And like you said, Charles Omenihu, you're going to have maybe Mike Dana. There's going to be other guys along the defensive line to take that pressure off of whichever player that would be. So for the Chiefs, I would love them to be able to go get another big guy that's north of 330 pounds, or their first guy above that's north of 330 pounds in Kenneth Grant to place next to the roughly 315-pound Chris Jones and just basically say we have 650 pounds of beef along the interior here. Good luck.
Yeah, and Mike Pennell, he's a veteran guy that was signed again on a 1-year deal to the Chiefs. He's a free agent as well, and that was like a big run stuffer. He's 32-ish years old too, so he's not getting any younger. We don't even know if he's going to be back. So if you could get somebody like that to help with the run and pair up next to Chris Jones, I love that idea. You mentioned that clip where he chases down the running back. I remember the first time I saw it, I think I watched it like 10 times in a row because that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
No, he's such a good player, and I call them my guys on Twitter is what I refer to them as, and it's players that do like really specific things, and Kenneth Grant is absolutely one of my guys, and you didn't ask the second round, but I'll bring up a guy that I really like. His name's Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. He had a really good Senior Bowl. He is a player that shows, Chiefs fans would love this. Andy would love this. high effort every single play. And there's times where he gets, a little flushed out in the run game, but the effort is never something you would question with Omar Norman Lott. And anytime I go back with the Chiefs specifically, anytime you would have a pass rusher come into that situation, you can't help but project the potential for the player because of the situation they're entering. I mean, you have Karlaftis and Jones ahead of you already, and you're going to get a lot of one-on-one opportunities.
If the Chiefs trade up and jump the Bills again, I'm going to lose it. That history with those two teams is one thing, like in the playoffs and all that stuff, and in the regular season, it's a great battle. But in the draft, the Chiefs have just smoked them. I mean, whether it's getting Mahomes or then they traded with the Bills to get Mahomes, or they jumped them for McDuffie. They traded up to get Worthy with the Bills. It's just like crazy. So if you do it again and it impacts the Bills and their draft plans, because the Bills, I think, wanted McDuffie. They settled for Elam, and he's been like a healthy scratch. And McDuffie's a blue chip prospect, or he's shaping up to be a blue chip player, in my opinion. And will maybe hopefully get extended this year, become one of the highest paid corners now before you have to pay him next year even more. But yeah, that'll be interesting if they end up doing that. Let's go running backs. I'm not saying that the Chiefs are going to take a running back in round one. I think that might be crazy, and maybe that's just my PTSD from them taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire in round one years back. We know how that didn't necessarily pan out. He didn't look the same after some of his injuries. But let's just say it's a deep running back class. We know that. But let's say the Chiefs are eyeing a running back, which I do hope they consider. Pacheco's on the last year of his deal. Pirine and Kareem Hunt are free agents. You have the running back fullback hybrid and Carson Steele. But I really think beefing up the O-line, yes, it's a must, but you need more of a threat back there. And even if Pacheco bounces back to his form after his ankle injury, like 1 year removed from that in recovery, he's on the last year of his deal. So is there any running backs that you like, considering like how they play and how the Chiefs like to use their running backs, kind of like a Swiss Army knife back there? Is there any running backs maybe they got two third round picks, maybe one that could become available or be available that you would be like, hey, a couple of these guys would be a really good fit for the Chiefs offense if they could get him? Because remember, Kareem Hunt was a 3rd round pick. So it's like, if you could get somebody back there, like that would just be an instant contributor. I think it would be great for the Chiefs offense.
Yeah, so I wanted to pull up my notes to make sure I didn't miss anybody in particular. But there's several backs. There's Cameron Scatabo, who everybody loves from Arizona State. He had a really, really good end to the 2024 season. Obviously, everyone knows about Ashton Genty and how good he is. But Cameron Scatabo's production in 2024 was great. I don't know if he's going to last to the 3rd round. We'll see. But there's also Dylan Sampson, a running back from Tennessee, who I think he is kind of boomer bust player. He is a guy that is, he has wheels. He really has wheels, but he could have a really low floor because there's times where he doesn't hit the hole the way you'd like, and there's times where he absolutely does not miss, and good luck catching him. But then there's other players that I don't think necessarily would be in the 3rd round, although what I think needs to be kind of remembered with running backs, and this is a great case in point here with Isaiah Pacheco, is if you have the situation that the Chiefs do, a good offensive line, for me, a team like Kansas City, whether they take one in the 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, in Isaiah Pacheco's case, the 7th round, they can still get very similar production. So another player that I really like, I'll actually give you a couple here. I really like Damian Martinez from Miami. He is just a tone setter. He's a guy, and he's one of my guys where I love the tone setters that will, kick rear end and take names later. And that's Damian Martinez. He had a really good year with Oregon State in 2023 before transferring to Miami in 2024. And that's the play style that I gravitate towards. I want to be the enforcer, and I want to inflict the pain on the opponents over the course of 60 minutes. And I also look at a player who struggled in 2024 in Oklahoma State running back Ollie Gordon. I think this would be a really Chiefs pick, and I mean this in the best way possible, where he, had a down year. Everybody's kind of out on him, but guess what? We're going to bring him to Kansas City, and he's going to be a really good player. And I think Ollie Gordon's game is, the power's there, and it's more of just not being an upright runner immediately, and that's something that can definitely be worked with. And kind of to go back to the pass rush situation, where if you draft a guy in the 4th or 5th round, you can have him split carries. You don't have to worry about bringing a guy in with the 63rd pick or the 66th pick and say, hey, we need you to have 17 carries, 87 yards a game. And if you don't, then there's no chance we get back to the Super Bowl. So again, a very favorable situation for the Chiefs. They could go running back anywhere from that late 2nd round pick to the 5th round. I could mentally justify the selection as long as the value's there.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I was just playing out a scenario where if the right guy fell, they went earlier than expected. But Brett Veach in his presser at the Combine said, hey, there's pockets of these position groups where you can find a really good value late in the round. And he specifically brought up when he was talking about the running back class, and then he kind of went back to when they got Isaiah Pacheco, because like his production and his value for a 7th round pick, kind of like Jalen Watson, different side of the ball with as him being a cornerback, but like you find value and you get a quality starter in these late rounds, like everybody's happy with that. If Isaiah Pacheco was a 1st round pick, and he wasn't for a few different reasons, but he fit the Chiefs really well. But if he was a 1st round pick, or even 1st, 2nd round pick, the expectations are so high. You get a running back in the 5th, 6th round, and you're like, hey, this guy had 600 yards or whatever, 500 yards his rookie year. Like, dude, that was awesome. He's a 5th, 6th round pick. Like, so if you could find a guy, not just so people aren't as harsh on him in Chiefs Kingdom, but just later on, they fall. It's a good deep class, and you're like, hey, this guy will fit our scheme. Like, I love that you brought that up and mentioned it, because Brett Veach did basically the same thing when he was talking to the media.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Chiefs are, since the Bucs Super Bowl, just in terms of the moves they've made, I've loved pretty much every one of them. You know, hey, Trey Smith's fallen because of a medical condition. You know what? Let's just take a 6th round flyer and see if it works out. And not surprisingly, it does. In Chiefs' case, it does. And it's just little things like that where it's just like there's so many just right things they do. Hey, let's go trade up for Trent McDuffie. You can name it. They do it. You know, hey, let's draft Creed Humphrey and not overthink it. And he's been extended because he's one of the best players at his position. They have done everything. They're kind of like the AFC version of the Eagles, where they build through the trenches. They got their rear ends kicked in one Super Bowl 4 years ago, and they basically said, we don't want that to happen again. Now, this year was a little bit of an outlier due to injuries, but they still got back to the Super Bowl. I mean, they were the representative in the conference. So the Chiefs and Brett Veach have just done a phenomenal job, and it's so much more than just Big Red, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce. And I love just looking at the decisions they make every offseason, and just can't wait to see how it plays out even this offseason.
The last position I'll ask you about, just with them deciding to franchise tag Trey Smith, and hopefully even maybe by the time this video comes out, he's got a long-term deal done. But with them doing that, I mean, maybe that means we see Nick Bolton gone. I don't know that for sure. They could probably work something out with him. You've got Justin Reed as well. That's a free agent. And both of those guys were really big pieces of Spags' defense. So let's just say Nick Bolton did get offered like top 3, top 5 linebacker money elsewhere and ended up moving on, sadly, to some in the kingdom. Some are fine to try something new, try something different. I think Drew Tranquill could fill in Nick Bolton's role. But even with that being said, you're going to need a linebacker for the future in some capacity, because Drew Tranquill, I'm pretty sure he'll be on the last year of his deal. Leo Chanel, I think on the last year of his deal, or you have one more after that, and then that's really all you got. Is there a linebacker that you like, that you think would be a good fit for the Chiefs? It could be in 2nd round, could be 3rd, could even they could even go up and get him in one of these rounds. Just would love to hear your thoughts on a couple of guys that maybe come to mind.
Yeah, so I'll give you 3. I think there's, with this class, that there's not that much difference between like the 27th player drafted and then the 70th player drafted. I think there's a much bigger difference between 1 and 20 than I do like 22 and 70, right? Somebody called it a meat and potatoes draft. I saw that recently, and I love that definition of this draft class. There's not a lot of star talent, but that's fine. You don't have to have the Caleb Williams, the Drake Mays, and everybody. And the reason that I bring this up is because I think this linebacker class kind of has a couple of tiers. And now the Chiefs are not going to have a shot at one of the premier linebackers. You know, they're not going to have a shot. Jahad Campbell just absolutely tore up the combine. He's going to go long before the Chiefs are ever on the clock. Jalen Walker from Georgia, another really good prospect. The Chiefs are not going to have a chance at him. Somebody's going to fall in love. He's going to be long gone before. And there's even rumors that Jalen Walker might become an edge rusher. But 2 players that I really like at that late 2, early 3 turn are Chris Paul Jr., no relation to the NBA player Chris Paul, but Chris Paul Jr., linebacker from Ole Miss. I just look at him and I go back to focusing on what a player can do. He's rangy. He's a really good tackler. He's really fundamentally sound. And the one thing that you look at Chris Paul Jr. and look at and say, what does he not do well? Because that's obviously the reason that guys fall down the boards, is what they can't do, is there's times where he gets a little flushed out in the run game, a little bit. And obviously, he's 230 pounds. He's not going to be able to cover, premier tight ends probably the way that you would like, the way that corners do. Again, he's a linebacker, not a corner for a reason. But he's, to me, such a good player that I would love to see him in a Spagnuolo defense. And there's also a really good linebacker from UCLA, Carson Schlesinger, another just steady Eddie at the position. You know what you're getting. You're not going to overthink it. And he's probably going to, wherever he gets drafted, probably going to be a solid NFL player at minimum. And he's what I would consider a high floor player where you know what you're going to get. The ceiling might not be a prime Ray Lewis, obviously, and that's an extreme exaggeration, but you know what you're going to get. So either one of those players at that late 2, early 3 turn. Now, one player that if I were in a war room, I would go to bat for late on day 3, that mid to late 6th round selection area. Jay Higgins is a linebacker from Iowa, not too far from Kansas City. Jay Higgins' problem, I feel like we're in Moneyball. His problem here, Billy Bean, what can he do is he's not that fast, but his instincts on tape are really good. And I feel like with Iowa players, they are fundamentally sound. They're really well coached. They're just good football players. And I look at Jay Higgins and I think he is that. He's a fundamentally sound tackler. He's an instinctual linebacker. He fits the run gap well. He does his job in coverage. And again, you're not going to want him to cover these the Dalton Kincaid's downfield, for example, or Isaiah Likely's downfield. That would be putting him in a position to fail. But he's a good football player that I think somebody will get a steal on day 3.
It's interesting because I'm not going to directly compare them. Because I don't want to be disrespectful, but like some of the things you were saying is his weaknesses is like, oh, we're kind of used to that with Nick Bolton. Like he has great instincts, great tackler, great stopping the run, splitting the gaps, like all that. But he does struggle a bit in coverage. His lack of elite speed gets him beat on the outside. So it's like, hey, if you could find somebody in the late rounds like that again, it's no disrespect to Bolton, but that could fill a similar skill set. I'm not saying he'll be a foundational piece per se that early on, but if you could find somebody like that late in the rounds, it's again another guy that it's like, oh, that's value, especially for the round that you get him in.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't hate the comparison for Jay Higgins to Nick Bolton. Now, I don't think it's a 1-to-1 comparison, apples to apples, but I really don't hate the comparison.
Well, make sure to give Garrett from Football Analysis a sub on his YouTube channel, a follow on his Twitter/X account. Both are in the description down below. Then let me know your thoughts on some of these draft scenarios we talked through and players mentioned. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?